الرحيم. Welcome everyone to our fifth lecture of the project management course. And as you know, we have started discussing the agile project management. In the last lecture, we started explaining or going into details of the agile project management. So we started, I think we covered the agile manifesto, which consists of 4 core values. And I told you those values are important. You need actually to memorize them. What are those core values? Who can memorize them? We summarized them with 4 words, right? What is the first principle or the first core value? Yes, people. People and interaction over processes and tools, right? Okay, the second core value. Excellent, yes, working product over what? We prefer having a working product over comprehensive, yes, documentation. The third core value is, yes, customer collaboration over what? Over sticking to a contract, right? Over contract negotiation, correct? And the last core value is change, yes. So responding to change over following a plan. Excellent, great. So it means that you started like me falling in love with the agile project management, hopefully. So those are the core 4 values, as we mentioned, that basically apply to any agile approach. For any approach to be agile, we need to make sure that those core values are followed. Okay, and then we explain the 12 guiding principles or supporting principles. We explain them. There is no need again to memorize them, but you need to understand them and to, you know, to create a mindset that follow those principles. This is the most important thing. Agile is commonly defined as a mindset. It's not like even a fixed approach. It's a mindset. When you have this mindset, you can create any approach that, you know, that again corresponds to those core values and 12 principles. So it's a mindset that we need actually to embrace in order to, you know, in order to be successful as an agile project manager. Great. So let's continue. If you don't have any questions so far, any questions? Okay, so let's continue with explaining the details of the agile project management. How is planning done in agile project management? Because many people think that when you follow an agile approach, you don't do a lot of planning. They think that you just do whatever you need to do and respond to change whenever a change takes place, and that's it. You don't need to plan. And that is completely wrong, as you will see. Actually, it's the other way. It's completely the other way around. In agile management approaches, you do more planning than in traditional project management, because you do planning at different levels, and in every iteration, you need to plan and replan, and with every change that comes, you need to plan and replan and replan. And for that reason, actually, we do more planning in agile project management than in traditional project management. So this is an important point that you need to keep in mind. Okay. Now, how's planning is done, and what are the technicalities of agile project management? Let's go ahead and explain a little bit about it. First of all, and in order to launch an agile project, you need to start with a product vision. Now, this is the only thing that you cannot change in an agile project. The vision cannot be changed. And the vision is, again, is a summary, is one sentence or two of what we want to create in this project. For instance, we want to create a food delivery application. This is our vision in the project. So this vision cannot be changed. You cannot, while you're doing the project, you cannot change the vision and tell the team that you changed your mind and now you want to create a health management system. You can change whatever you want, but the product vision cannot be changed, because the product vision, or what we call also the North Star, because it's a guide, and we are all going in that direction towards the North Star. So you cannot change your North Star, otherwise you will lose directions, right? So the vision cannot be changed. And the customer, or the one who represents the customer, the one that we will call from now on the product owner. So the product owner, which represents basically the customer and the users, creates this vision, the vision statement. And of course, this vision statement should be in alignment with the company's strategy and the company vision, the vision of the company as whole, of what the company is trying to do or trying to achieve over the next 3 to 5 years. And again, this is the responsibility of the product owner. He needs to take the input from the customer, from the top management, from basically probably other stakeholders as well, and formulates this vision of what we are trying to achieve in this project. Okay, does that make sense? So the vision cannot be changed. Now, based on the vision that has been set and approved, we start what we call release planning. And I think you've heard this term before, the release, especially in the software industry, right? Any application, basically, any platform that you might have used has been implemented or has been developed through certain or through different releases, starting from the first release to the second release to the third release. And in every release, enhancement has been done, new features has been added, new functions has been introduced, and so on, right? So basically what we want to do is to take this vision, let's say again that I want to create an application for food delivery, or food orders delivery. And we try to break down this vision into releases. So this application will be created on 3 releases. Release 1 with some basic functions, release 2 with some enhancements and additional functions and features, and release 3, which will, for instance, combine all the features and functions that we want in the application, okay? Now, in traditional project management, we don't have this kind, right, of planning or of release planning. In the traditional project management, we have only 1 release, which takes place at the end of the project, right? When we basically finish the product and we deliver the product to the customer. So it's 1 release. But in Agile, we have releases, okay? So we start by, again, breaking down the product vision into multiple releases. And releases can be based on time or certain set of features. So you can, for instance, decide to launch a release every 6 months, or again, you can decide to have a certain release with a set of features and functions that you have planned. Okay, the value here, or the keyword here, is basically the value that we want to introduce. So we look all the time at the business value. Each release should create a new business value, should add a new business value that we want to introduce to the customer, okay? We will see an example of that a little bit later on, okay? So release planning, again, will define how many releases the product will go through. And we usually start by the most valuable requirements or features in the early releases. So for instance, the first release will be dedicated to accomplish the very essential features of the product, the most important features of the product. And then the second release will add new features with a little bit less value. And the third release will add the new features with a little bit less value, and so on. So we basically, again, focus on delivering the value and the highest value as soon as possible in the project. Now, these features and functions, how we document them and how we track them, we document them and track them using a document that we call a product backlog. So a product backlog represents the set of features and functions and requirements and what we will call later on user stories that the team will create. And those features and functions and user stories are in the product backlog are set by priority. So starting from the highest priority features and functions and user stories and going down to the lower priority features and functions and so on. And this product backlog is owned by who? Who controls the product log? Who can add features or take out features or reprioritize features? Again, it's the product owner, okay? So the product owner here again, or the business representative, we call them as well, is the one that fully controls the product backlog. So he has full authority to add features to the product backlog or subtract features from the product backlog or reprioritize features in the product backlog, while the team, the development team, the team that will work to create those features and functions will work on the items in the product backlog by priority. They will take the items on the top of the list and they will start working on them, as we will explain later on, okay? So again, each release will have a set of features, functions that we want to accomplish during that release. So this is how we start planning our releases, by identifying the features and functions that we want to accomplish in each release. And then we try to graphically represent that using a product roadmap. Now take this as a rule. In Agile project management, we always prefer using what we call low-tech, high-touch tools. Low-tech, high-touch tools. So we prefer tools that are not sophisticated technically. We don't prefer using complicated softwares to follow up with the tasks or to follow up with the team or to represent our product and so on. No, we prefer low-tech tools such as whiteboards, such as sticky notes, such as paper and pen, okay? So, and high touch, we prefer tools that give us, high visibility, so we can look at what is going on, or we can have a planning that is highly visible and everyone can look at the plan and can discuss the plan and so on. And for this reason now, we will start by creating a product, what we call a product roadmap. Now, a product roadmap is a high-level visual summary of the product and how the product will be developed using releases, okay? And what is the strategy and direction of the product while being built. And we can use or assign themes to each release. So this is the release of the, of the bear. You can give names, themes to each release that basically gives some kind of code name to the release. What are you trying to build in this release, okay? Let's have an example of this product roadmap in order to understand it well. just skip that to the product roadmap. Okay, so here's what you see is a product roadmap. Again, we start by a vision. Okay, so the product owner should have here set a product vision. For instance, again, we want to build a food order delivery system. So this is our vision. Now, the product owner meets the team along with the project leader, for sure, and probably with other stakeholders as well. And they start discussing and negotiating how this application will be developed and how many releases there will be in the journey of creating a product. So for instance, here, the product owner, after discussing, the product owner, of course, he's the decision maker, but he needs to discuss the possibilities with, especially with the team, right? And with other stakeholders. So here the product owner decided that we will need to develop this product over 3 releases as a start. And maybe we will see later after 3 releases, maybe we'll add other releases as well. But as for now, we have decided that we need 3 releases for this product. The first release that will focus on the most important features and functions of the product or of the application. The second release that will add enhancements, for instance, in security and performance to the application. And the third release that will add additional features and functions that will make the application, for instance, more usable and easy to use. Okay, so, and we can give them again what themes or code names like the foo theme, the bar theme, the plantain theme, whatever theme, longhorn. You hear those code names, right? In the software industry all the time, you hear those code names for the products. They give code names for releases until they achieve the final release of the product, like Windows, for instance, and the different releases of Windows. Okay, so basically here again, the product owner, he owns this and he decides on this because he represents the business. He decided that we will have 3 releases of the product, and he decides on the goals of each of the releases. For instance, again, the goal of this release is to launch the basic functions and features of the product. The goal of this release is to enhance the security and performance of the product. The goal of the third release is to add new features and functions to the product, and so on. Okay, now that we have decided on the releases, we discuss again, the product owner with the team, how many iterations would we need in each release in order to achieve those goals, and what is the goal of each iteration. So now we are planning for iterations. Okay, so what will be done or would be done in iteration 0, what would be done in iteration 1, in iteration 2, and by this we finish release 1 and then we move on to release 2, but we continue like notice the sequence of iteration does not stop here. So in release 2 we have iteration 3, iteration 4, and so on. Okay, now I'm sure that you have noticed something, that in iteration 0 we don't have any user stories or requirements or functions or features that are to be developed. It's empty here, right? What's the reason, and why did we start with the number 0, not with the number 1? Why do you think the reason is? Why don't we start from iteration 1 and start by building some features and functions in the application? Because iteration 0 is what? Exactly. Iteration 0 is only dedicated to set up the stage for the team so they can start working. So for instance, we start by dedicating a war room, a room for the team to work in. We make sure that all the team have the equipment that they need. So we provide them with the laptops, I don't know, or with the server that they will use to compile the code, right? So we basically, it's a mobilization iteration, it's a setup iteration where the team will build nothing. There is nothing that is going to be built in this iteration. We will deliver nothing to the customer in this iteration. It's only for setup, right? And for that reason, we call it iteration 0. Okay. Why? As you see, from now on in iteration 1 and the next iterations, we will decide on the user stories or features or functions that will be built. Now, again, this is made very easily using whiteboard and sticky notes. You don't have to use a complicated program or use Microsoft Word or use, I don't know, Visio or something. No. Just use the simplest tools. Again, this is one rule of thumb in agile approaches, to use low-tech, high-touch tools. So just use sticky notes and, you know, decide on what are the features and functions that we will, or that the team is supposed to be building on each iteration. Okay. Now here you have different terms that you will hear from now on. For instance, you will hear the term epic. What is an epic? Epic is a feature or a function that is huge enough that we don't really, or we cannot really now understand fully. So we will postpone understanding that feature or breaking down that feature into more and simpler functions and features to the stage when we arrive to them, right? So for instance, if the customer or if the product owner tells us, I need the application to be, for instance, fully secured and cannot be, or fully encrypted. Okay, now this is a feature that has lots of details into it. What kind of encryption, how is the encryption is made, how are the information, or how would be the information telecommunicated over the encryption channels and so on. So here you have lots of details that you don't need and don't have to clarify at this point, because now you are still on iteration 1. So you will leave this as an epic until we reach that point, until we reach iteration 5. We will not now go into details of this epic, just leave it as is, as an epic. And once we arrive at iteration 5, we can discuss it again with the product owner and try to help the product owner, you know, decompose this epic into more understandable, you know, features and functions. So this is what we mean by epic. Epic will basically consist of usually of several features. So we have here the term feature. So feature is like something is like, I want this application to be able to take orders from the, you know, from the users. So this is a feature. This feature is built in the system. Any user of the system can make orders, can make food orders. Okay. But again, the feature is a little bit, or might be a little bit complicated, and we need to clarify them by again breaking them down into what we call user stories. So I ask the product owner to give me this feature or to express this feature by telling me some user stories. So as a user of the system, I want to be able, for instance, to log in to the system and browse the food menu. Now, this is a user story, and it's more clear to me now, and to the development team, of course, and they can start working on it because it's clear now what we want to do. As a user that is logged into the system and browsing the menu, I can select the food that I want and add it to the, for instance, to the order list. Okay, so this is what we call user stories. And the point of asking the product owner to formulate the requirement or the features in a user story is to help the product owner focus on the value. Why do you want to do this? And later on you will see the user stories should be formulated in a certain context. As someone, I need to do something so that I can have this benefit or value. So the formulation of user stories follows a certain context that focuses on value. And this is what we all the time focus on in Agile project management, the value. We always seek to achieve the value, and we always want to help the product owner focus on the value and the priority of that value. And for that reason, we ask the product owner to formulate their requirements, to formulate their features or functions in user stories. And we will explain later on more on that. That's actually a very interesting thing that, as you will see, will play a vital role in the success of an Agile project management. Okay. So here you go again. You have, this is what now we have done so far. We started with a vision, and then we broke down the vision into releases, or the product basically into releases. In each release, a set of features and functions will be developed. And then we identified the goals of each iteration. Of course, after deciding for each release how many iterations there will be. And then, and corresponding to each goal, what are the user stories that the project team will be creating. Now, there might be also additional details. For instance, if the project has multiple teams, then each team is working on different user stories or on different features, right? You have, for instance, the functional team, you have the security team working on the security features, you have the performance team working on performance features, and so on. You might have this in big projects, okay? Whether it's a one team or different or several teams. And you might also want to assign some points for each user story, and points basically express the complexity of a user story. So it's a number that we give for each user story to express its complexity. So if it's a very simple user story that the development team can create very easily, then we will assign it number like 1 or 3 or 5. But if it's a very complicated user story that the team will need some time to create it and do it, then it will take a larger number, like, I don't know, 17 or 21 or whatever. Okay, we will explain later on more on that. So vision, release planning, iteration planning, functions and features, and user stories. And by this, you have created what we call a product roadmap. So this is a visual representation of our journey in creating the product. Okay, does that make sense to you? Is it now readable to you? You can read it. And of course, you can use a timeline as well in order to, you know, set some timeline for achieving each release and each iteration. Now, remember again one important rule, that all iterations will have the same duration. Okay, so if it's 2 weeks, then all iterations will be 2 weeks duration. If it's a 1 month, then all iterations will have 1 month duration. You cannot have different periods for different iterations. Okay. Any questions so far, ladies, gentlemen? Everything is clear so far? The terms? Excellent. Now again, let me tell you, you need to review all of that. because I know most of those concepts are probably new to you, and you need some time, to compile them, to, process them in your new mindset. So take your time, try to review those lectures again in order to make sure that you understand every detail of them. Okay? Great. So again, and this is very important, you will have lots of questions in the PMP exam focusing on the different roles of the different people in the project. And when you understand those well, you will answer those questions correctly. So for instance, what are now the product owner duties that we have mentioned so far? Now keep in mind again, the product owner is the one that represents the business, right? And we mentioned in the 12 principles that business people and developers should work together on a daily basis, right? So this person who is the product owner, who represents the business, he is responsible for whatever the business asks for or needs. So all the requirements, all the features, all the functions, the vision, the releases, the user stories, the epics will come from the product owner. The backlog, again, which is the document that we use to track the features and functions and user stories, the product backlog is owned by the product owner. So no one can change or update that document except the product owner. Keep that in mind and you will answer lots of questions in the exam. Okay, so again, what are the product owner's duties? Help the team prioritize work based on the value that the capability will provide. Again, he is responsible for prioritizing value, not the team. The team can discuss, can make suggestions, can give hints, but the final decision is made by the product owner, okay? The product owner is accountable for the ultimate business value of the solution produced by the team. He or she creates and socializes the product vision. So he's responsible for creating and formulating the product vision. They coordinate different business needs from different stakeholders together into the product backlog. It means he or she, okay? So just to be neutral about it, let's use the term they. Responsible for defining and prioritizing the user stories with the help of the team, answers team questions about the needed solution, provides timely feedback to the team. Okay, so those are the duties of the product owner. You need to keep this into mind. And again, after that, we have decided on the releases. We do iteration planning where we set goals for the iteration that we want to start. We use the term iteration or we use the term sprint. Sprint comes from the rugby team play, the American football. So it's a sprint that the team do, or iteration. It's the same meaning, iteration or sprint. Goals are based on the product backlog. Product owner and the development team work together to prioritize features. But again, the final call is for the product owner. And this is done at the start of each sprint or each iteration. So in every iteration that we will start, the product owner with the team will meet and decide what is the goal of the sprint or iteration and what are the user stories that the team should develop in this iteration. And this is done in every iteration, right? After the product roadmap, because the product roadmap is just, again, a high-level visualization of what we will do. But the product roadmap will be updated all the time, right? It can be changed all the time. In Agile, we welcome changes, right? So we start with a high-level visualization of what we will do in this project, but at any point of time, we can update it. We might find that we need another iteration for this release, or we might find there is no need for a third iteration in this release, so we can take it out and add it to the next release, for instance. We can change some goals for the releases or for the iterations. We can postpone some user stories to the next iterations or next releases, and so on. Again, based on what? Based on the value and the priority that the product owner sets. Does that make sense to you? So for that reason, we have again to replan at the beginning of each iteration or each sprint. Again, we have a meeting between the product owner and the project team. And again, we discuss what is the goal of the sprint or iteration, what are the user stories that need to be created in this sprint or iteration, and we launch the sprint or iteration. We will explain that into more details later on, okay? Sorry, we forgot about the break. So we'll take like, again, 10 minutes, 12 minutes break for the prayer. And we will continue by explaining a very popular agile approach, which is the Scrum. So after the break, we will give you a thorough explanation of the Scrum approach, which is a popular agile approach. So see you in 15 minutes. So we started explaining the specifics of agile planning, release planning, iteration planning, product roadmap. And now let's take an example. One of the most popular, probably is the most popular agile approach, which is the Scrum. It's a very popular approach, Scrum. And it's as the authors mention, it's very easy to understand, but very difficult to master. So as you will see, it's pretty much easy to understand how to follow this approach in managing projects. But when you try to apply it, you will find some difficulty. Anyways, let's start by explaining this approach. So in this approach, we have those roles in the project team. We have the product owner. Again, who is the product owner? He's the one that represents the business requirements, the user's requirements. So he represents the business. He owns whatever decisions that are related to the business and the business value and the priorities, right? And we have the team, the development team. Those are the team that will develop, that will create the product, whether it's a software or not software, okay? We have the Scrum Master, who is basically the leader of the project, right? Because we need a leader for the project. And by the way, in agile approaches, we completely avoid the use of the word manager. You will probably not find any single approach that uses the word project manager. No. For instance, in Scrum, we use this term, Scrum Master. In other approaches, we use the term leader, coach, facilitator, but not manager, for the reasons that we explained in the last lecture, right? We explained in the last lecture what is the difference between a leader and a manager. So, and we mentioned also that the main leadership style used in the agile approaches is what? Who can recall what we call that specific leadership style? We called it what? Excellent. Yes, servant leadership. So the leader serves the team, empowers the team, provides the team but with whatever they need in order to make this team or to create a successful environment for the team to create and develop. Okay, so these are the different roles in the Scrum approach. Now, the iteration in the Scrum approach is called sprint, as I mentioned earlier. So whenever you see sprint, it means the iteration. Now, one single important concept that is used in the Scrum is what we call the time box. So we try to we actually make all the events or ceremonies in Scrum, we make them timely boxed. So they have a certain limit of time that they cannot exceed. Starting from the iteration or the sprint. For instance, the sprint is timely boxed by 1 month. So the maximum period that a sprint can take is 1 month. And the preferred actually, or the best practice in Scrum is to make the iteration or sprint 2 weeks. So 2 weeks to 1 month, but not to exceed 1 month. And again, when we agree on a certain duration, this duration will be fixed throughout the project. You cannot change this later on. You cannot change the duration of the sprint from 2 weeks to 3 weeks or from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. Okay, no, it's fixed. Once we settle on a period of time, it's fixed throughout the project. Now, in this literature, they mentioned from 1 to 4 weeks, but actually what is applicable, what is more applicable is 2 to 4 weeks. Okay, 2 to 4 weeks. And the best practice again is 2 weeks. We always prefer the sprint to be 2 weeks in duration. Okay, so let's see what happens in this or throughout the sprint. Now, the product owner again owns this document, which is the product backlog. The product backlog contains the features and functions or user stories that the product owner wants the team to develop, and they are ranked by priority, right? So for instance, number 1 is the most valuable and the most important feature that we need the team to start working with. Number 2 is the second priority, and so on, right? So this is the product backlog. And again, just to remind you, documentation in agile approaches is what is lightweight, right? So this is a very plain document. It's not a complicated document. It's not we don't have a version control for the document. We don't have like so much details, and it's only, you know, the features or the user stories that we need to develop throughout the project, along probably with their points referring to their complexity, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, so the product owner have or owns the product backlog. Now, in the first day of the sprint, the product owner meets the team to discuss, as we mentioned, the goal of the sprint and what are the user stories that we need to create in this sprint. Okay, so we have in the first day of the sprint, we have what we call a sprint planning meeting. Okay, and again, because we explained the concept of time boxed, this meeting is time boxed by 8 hours for a sprint that takes 4 weeks. Okay, so if we decided that the sprint will take 4 weeks, then this planning meeting that will take place in the first day will take maximum 8 hours. But for instance, if we decided that the sprint will take 2 weeks, then the sprint planning meeting will be time boxed by how many hours do you think? By how many hours for a sprint that takes 2 weeks? Excellent, 4 hours only. So it's relative, right? So whenever we mention time box, it's relative to the duration of the sprint. Okay. So again, for a sprint that takes 4 weeks, this meeting is time boxed by 8 hours. So basically it's the first day in the sprint. The development team meet the product owner and they discuss together what are the user stories or functions or features that they need to develop in this iteration or in this sprint. So for instance, here they decided that they will work on 1, 2, 3. Okay, those are the items in the sprint backlog that the team will work to accomplish in this sprint. Okay, now 1, 2, 3 will become what we call the sprint backlog. The sprint backlog basically will contain the items that the team agreed to develop for the product owner in this sprint. Now the team owns this sprint backlog, and the team will translate this sprint backlog into tasks that they will assign to themselves. Okay, so we have here a task breakout for, so in order, for instance, to develop those user stories, Mr. X should create the database, Mr. Y will need to do the designs, Mr. Z will do the testing, and so on. So they translate the sprint backlog into tasks that they, again, distribute among themselves, because we mentioned that the team in Agile is self-organized, right, and self-directed. So no one can assign them the tasks, not the product owner, not the Scrum Master. They will do the assignment themselves because they understand what is the potential, what are the strengths of each member of them. Okay. And once we start working, or once the team start working on delivering those items, the product owner cannot change the sprint backlog. Okay. Once started, no changes are allowed. The product owner cannot, for instance, come to the team and tell them, I changed my mind, let's work on 4, not 3. That is forbidden once we start the sprint. And it's forbidden for a reason, because we want the team to stay focused on what they are doing. So if you come every day and the other and ask them to change something, they will lose their focus and they will lose their productivity. So once the sprint is started, you cannot change with the items that have been agreed on. But if the product owner perceives that it's important that we change the priorities, the product owner can ask for a cancellation. So we can cancel the sprint and start a new sprint. Now, this is possible. Cancel the sprint and start a new sprint with the new items to be developed. But changing the items in the sprint, that is not possible. That is forbidden. Okay, does that make sense to you? Any questions so far? So, if sprint backlog completed ahead of time, is this okay? Now, we usually, or the team usually, this is why we use points. Okay, now this is something that we will discuss actually later on in details. But the team uses the points to estimate the size of the work. Okay, and the team tends to take what they expect more than that they can handle. So just in case, so they know basically, and after a while, how many points they can achieve in every sprint, okay? So for instance, if they in average can achieve 50 points, then in every sprint, they take 50 to 60 points. So just to avoid this situation. So basically, no, the sprint should be fixed. The duration should be fixed, okay? So if we finished ahead of time, the team will use the remaining time to look for opportunities to improve or to look for some feedback from the product owner just to make sure of enhancement or whatever. But the duration of the sprint should be fixed all the time, okay? Okay, So once started again, the sprint backlog cannot be changed. The sprint can be canceled, but sprint backlog cannot be changed, or no change in requirements can be accepted. Okay. Now, what happens in every day in the sprint is that every day is started with a daily meeting. We call it the daily Scrum meeting. Now, this is again a timely boxed meeting. It's timely boxed by 15 minutes. And it's done while standing. And for that reason, we call it also a stand-up meeting. This is a stand-up meeting. No one is allowed to sit down, just to make sure that everyone is focused and everyone wants to get the meeting done with the results expected from the meeting. So we don't allow sitting. And this meeting takes place every day at the same place at the same time. So we agree from the beginning of the sprint where we will hold this meeting and what time is this meeting to be held. Okay, so for instance, we say every day we will meet at or in meeting room number 3, 8 o'clock sharply. Okay, what are the things to be discussed in this meeting? In this meeting, the development team, each one of the development team, each developer or each member of the development team will answer 3 questions. What have I created yesterday? What do I want to create today? What are the obstacles or impediments that I am facing? Okay, so every person in the development team should answer those 3 questions, addressing the other team members. What are the things that I have created yesterday? What are the things that I want to create today? What are the impediments or obstacles that I'm facing in my development? Okay, so this team is held every day. Now it's obligatory, it's imperative that all the development team attend and answer those 3 questions. The product owner and the Scrum Master are also encouraged to also attend this meeting, but if they don't attend, it's not obligatory, but for the development team, it's obligatory. Okay, so this continues every day. Every day we meet in the morning, we discuss as team members what we created yesterday, what we want to create today, what are the impediments. And the Scrum Master, now who can tell me now what is the role of the Scrum Master here? Because he didn't participate in selecting, for instance, the items that the team will be working on. He is not participating in the daily Scrum meeting or the stand-up meeting. What is the role again of the Scrum Master here? He is what, or she is what? A servant leader. So basically, if there are some impediments that the team members are facing, then he will work to resolve those issues. He will work to resolve those impediments, right? If the people need some, I don't know, special resources, special equipment, special technology, then the Scrum Master will work to provide them with this, whatever they need. And another important role of the Scrum Master here, the Scrum Master is responsible for making sure of maintaining the Scrum rules. So the Scrum Master makes sure that the daily meeting is taking place every day at the same time, at the same place for 15 minutes, not exceeding 15 minutes, and so on. The Scrum Master makes sure that the sprint planning meeting takes place at the first day of the sprint and does not exceed 8 hours, again for a sprint of 4 weeks, and so on. So they maintain, the Scrum Master maintain and observes the rules, the application of the Scrum rules. He's responsible for making sure that everyone is committing to the Scrum rules, okay? And of course, he is serving the team as a servant leader, okay? Okay, so we do this every day. We do this every day until we reach the final day of the sprint. In the final day of the sprint, there are two meetings. We call them, by the way, meetings, events or ceremonies too. So what are the two ceremonies, or what are the two meetings that will take place at the last day of the sprint? The first meeting is what we call the sprint review. In this meeting, the development team will demonstrate the finished work to the product owner. So they will present the product owner with the finished work, and they will ask the product owner to try the finished work, try the new features, try the functions that we have created, try one, try two, try three. Have we finished all of them? Do you accept them? Do they meet the acceptance criteria? And the definition of done, there's what we call the definition of done. The product owner also sets a definition of done for the team to observe. So in order to consider this feature done, you need to give me this feature working correctly and documented correctly and working, for instance, on the web and the iOS and Android on 3 platforms. For instance, that might be the definition of done. Okay, so the product owner also might set, or is responsible actually, for setting the definition of done. And the definition of done is used in this meeting to make sure that the work is done, is considered actually done, and is accepted and can be used by the product owner or by the users. Okay, now again, this is a meeting that is timely boxed by 4 hours for a sprint of 4 weeks. Again, so if you have a sprint of 2 weeks, then this meeting is timely boxed by 2 hours, right? Okay. Okay, is it clear to you what's the objective of this meeting, of this event? So again, to demonstrate the work that has been done, the finished work, and it's a formal acceptance here. The product owner reviews and accepts the work that has been done. What if some work or some items, for instance, number 3, feature number 3, did not meet the definition of done or the acceptance criteria? What happens then? What happens then is that item 3 will be returned back to the product backlog for the next sprint. And the product owner might reprioritize it now according to their perception. So it might be, again, the top priority, or it might go down into the priority list, okay? But it will go back to the product backlog, and the product owner will, again, the product owner will do this at the beginning of each sprint. They will reprioritize the items, okay? So this is what happens in the sprint review. The sprint review, again, meeting is timely boxed by 4 hours for a sprint that takes 4 weeks. After the sprint review, there is another meeting that we call the sprint retrospective. What is the objective here of the sprint retrospective? The objective of the sprint retrospective is to collect the lessons learned from this iteration or from this sprint, and to look at the performance of the team and how it can be improved. So what went well, what went bad, and how can we improve our performance in the next iteration? Okay, so it's lessons learned and continuous improvement meeting. Okay, we call this the sprint retrospective. So the team will reflect on their performance in the past iteration or past sprint and will make decisions on how to improve their performance by, for instance, modifying some processes or whatever in the next iteration. Okay, this is also a timely boxed event. It's timely boxed by 3 hours for a sprint that takes 4 weeks. Okay, that makes sense, everyone? Any questions so far? Okay, I think we have a question. Who is responsible of measuring and reporting the progress? Okay, you're asking like questions that we will answer in the future, but to give you a quick answer, the team themselves, using again low-tech, high-touch tools such as the burn down, burn up charts, the team will always update the performance of the project, of the features, for instance, that have been created or are in process or haven't started yet. Okay, the quality testing will fit in this approach. Well, the quality, again, there are what we call verification and validation. So the team will do quality check while they are doing the sprint, and the product owner will make the final validation in the sprint review. Okay. Okay, is the coordinator a part of the team? No, there is no coordinator here. We have only Scrum Master, which again facilitates, who facilitates all the process and who maintains the Scrum rules and who works as a servant leader. And we have the development team and we have the product owner. We don't have other, roles in this project. And by the way, there's a maximum number of the Scrum team. The Scrum team cannot exceed 11 persons. Okay, the development team basically cannot exceed 9 persons, plus the product owner, plus the Scrum Master. So the total team cannot exceed 11 persons. Crystal approach, yes, we will explain it later on. Yes, it's one of the agile approaches, the crystal approach. Is it good? Well, depends on what you use it for, okay? The expert project manager will always create a hybrid approach that fits their project. Keep this in mind. The expert project manager will always create a hybrid approach. Will take something probably from the Scrum, will take something from Kanban, will take something from Crystal, and creates the approach that best fits their project, okay? There is no Scrum manager. Again, there's a Scrum Master, okay? And he is considered, yes, the project leader. I mentioned that we don't use the project manager in agile approaches, okay? He is the project leader here because he leads by serving, he facilitates, or she, of course, facilitates, and they maintain the rules. Okay, is it clear to you? Is it clear to you the roles of the team here? All the members of the team. So you have again the product owner, which represents the business. You have the team or development team that creates the product, and you have the Scrum Master who facilitates the Scrum rules. Okay. Any other question? Any other question so far? Great. So again, the daily Scrum is a stand-up meeting that takes place every day at the same place at the same time. And each development team member will answer 3 questions. What have you done since the last daily Scrum? What will you do today? Are there any impediments in your way? And then we have at the last day of the iteration or the sprint, we have the sprint review meeting where the development team provides a demo of the product, and the product owner and development team on the stage and decide to what items have been accepted, what items were not accepted. The sprint retrospective is a look back at the last sprint. It's an opportunity to optimize efficiency, and it's an opportunity to refine environment and process. Okay. Now again, Scrum is probably the most popular Agile approach, but there are also so many Agile approaches that are actually, you cannot count now how many Agile approaches we have. We have like a limitless number of Agile approaches, but other important and popular Agile approaches are the following that you might get, some question about in the exam. It's unlikely to get a question about them in the exam for certain approaches, but you need to know a few things about those approaches. For instance, we have the approach that is called XP, which stands for extreme programming. Now, this is an approach that is used to quickly develop software, and it uses an approach of pair programming, where I group my team into pairs. Each pair contains a developer and tester. So one will develop and the other will test. The objective here is to make sure that we catch any bug or any issue in the software as early as possible, and we make sure that we are developing the correct software as soon as possible. And there's a rotation, so after a while, the developer becomes a tester and the tester becomes a developer. So they exchange roles every now and then. And this enhances also the development cycle and enhances the speed of development. We call it also a test-driven development approach because it relies heavily on testing the software again to early find any bugs or any problems or any issues in the software. So we basically prepare the test before even we write the code. So when we write the code, we have a testing environment that we can use to test the code and make sure the code is working perfectly before handing it out to the product owner. So this is another approach that we call XP. It has also, of course, another rules to follow, but what you need to know about the XP is that it uses pair programming approach and it's a test-driven development. Another approach is what we call the FDD, feature-driven development, where we basically classify the features of the product that we want to create. So we have classes of features, and the team will develop the product by features. So they develop the feature and they test the feature, and then they move on to the next feature, develop it and test it, and then to the next feature, develop it and test it until they finish the whole features. Another approach is the Dynamic Systems Development Method, DSDM. It focuses on the business case. So we try to create a product or a software that solves an urgent problem, a business case, an urgent problem. And it's also a way to create a software very quickly. So they have a fast go-to-market, GTM go-to-market. So you can prepare a software very quickly. And it uses iterative delivery. So we might prepare the software quickly and deliver it quickly to the market. And then we leave it up to the market to test it and give us the feedback. And then we can go back and also enhance the product. So we have a pre-project and a post-project approach for creating this software. We call this approach, so we call this agile approach the DSDM. Another popular approach that we will discuss in details, and that is very important for the exam, is the Kanban. We will discuss it in details when we reach to it. But you need to know now that the Kanban is a signboard where we visualize the tasks that our team is working on, and it's a pull system, so tasks should be pulled from left to right, and it limits the work in process. So we try to minimize the work in process. We try to not launch many tasks at the same time, not start many tasks at the same time. On the other way around, we try to minimize actually the work in process, because the work in process is considered waste. Another approach is lean, and again we will discuss it more thoroughly when we reach to it. The lean approach basically focuses on eliminating waste. So basically streamlining the process of development in order to make it as fast as possible. And we have also the crystal approach, which are actually a group of methodologies customized by color names and are appropriate for different criticalities and team sizes. So for instance, if you have a very simple problem that you need to solve, then you use a crystal clear team, which is a very small team that can work very efficiently and quickly to create this simple, to solve or to resolve this simple problem. But if you have a very complicated problem, for instance, then you probably need a Zephyr crystal team that consists of tens of people working together in order to resolve this team. So the number of team here in the crystal approach depends on the criticality of the problem that you are working to resolve, and for that we have different crystals for different team. I think they're like nine color coded crystal levels for 9 levels of criticalities. Again, you will not be asked, and you don't need to know probably the details of those approaches, but this is what you need to know for the exam. Now, if you want to know more about those approaches, you can, for instance, take another course like the PMI ACP, PMI Agile Certified Practitioner course, where we explain those approaches in more details. Okay, but that's it now for the Agile approaches and for the specifics of the Agile. Any questions so far? I hope that everything is clear. Okay. Okay. Now that we have a very good understanding of how traditional project management is done and how Agile project management is done, let's now continue with our plan that I have indicated in the last lecture, right? In the last lecture, I told you, so we will now continue by going through the life cycle, the generic phases of the life cycle. So we'll start now explaining the initiating of a project, and then the planning of the project, and then the executing and monitoring and controlling of the project, and last, the closing of the project. And whenever we explain something in traditional project management, we compare it to Agile. So we explain the differences between what happens in traditional and what happens in Agile. Okay, ready to rock and roll, as they say. Okay, I think it's better we take again like 10 minutes or 15 minutes break, and then we start with the project initiation. Okay, is that fair? So 15 minutes, and we will be back to you. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, and let's continue with this lecture. So, as I mentioned, now we start by explaining each generic phase and the project life cycle. And of course, we start by the initiation phase. In the initiation phase, we will discuss the governance of the project, the vision, setting the project vision, setting the governance, developing the project charter, and also one important thing that we start doing from the initiation and throughout the project life cycle, which is identifying the stakeholders of the project. Okay, so let's start by discussing the project governance. What is the project governance? Why do we need it? And what is the governance steering committee? The project governance is the framework, functions, and processes that guide project management activities in order to create a unique product, service, or result that meets or that is aligned with one of the business objectives or strategic objectives. And that means that I need to make sure that this project is first aligned with a certain strategic objective or business goal for the organization. And second, I want to make sure that this project is properly governed. The way that we take decisions in the project, the way that we steer the project, the way that communication is done with this project or among this project and other projects is properly done in a way that we maintain the proper direction and the strategic alignment of the project. And that's why we need a governance. We need to set a project governance and probably a committee that is responsible for that governance, okay? Now this committee can be called the project board, or can be called the steering committee, or can be called the project governance committee. They all mean the same. And usually this committee will include the project sponsor plus some senior users, plus some PMO resources. Now we heard this term sponsor a couple of times. What is the project sponsor, or what is the role of a project sponsor? The project sponsor is, most of the time, is the project initiator and is one of the top management team. So he has a high level of authority. And again, most probably he's the one that suggested the project idea or initiative. So basically, they are called also the project initiator. And their role is to support the project manager and to maintain the project direction. They sponsor the project by providing the project the resources that the project needs, by resolving any issues that the project might face, especially with other departments, with other functional managers. And for me as a project manager, I need that one. I need someone from the top management that I can refer to if I face any issues with other departments or with other functional managers or issues in resources. So this is the one in the top management that sponsors the project by providing the resources, providing protection, advocating the project, and at the same time maintaining the project correct direction. So again, the steering committee or the governance board or the project board will include this, for sure, will include the project sponsor, will include some of the senior users if needed, and will include also some of the PMO resources. For instance, the program manager. If the project is part of a program, then the program manager or the portfolio manager if needed. Okay. Of course, he's one of the top management team. Again, he might be the IT director, for instance, who suggested that we develop a new accounting system. Okay. Yeah, it's different from the donors. If you are talking about NGO projects or about projects where we seek sponsors from outside the organization, no, this is different rule. Okay. No, the project sponsor is probably, again, the one who suggested the initiative. The IT director suggested that we develop a new system, a new accounting system, or a new ERP system. So the CEO asked them, for instance, to sponsor this project. And now this project is sponsored by the IT director. The IT director would assign a project manager and give them the responsibility of developing a charter. And then if the charter is approved, the project is launched. Okay. Okay. Now, one other important thing, do we need this governing or steering committee or governance board in all the projects? Actually, we do this only for the big, important, critical projects. But most of the time for small projects, small to medium projects, we don't actually set up a governance board or a steering committee. We only assign the role of the steering committee to the project sponsor. So the project sponsor takes the responsibility, of what the steering committee should be doing. The project sponsor does the governance, okay, in a small to medium projects. But if it's a big project, complex project, critical project, then we need to set up a steering committee or a governance board that makes sure, again, that the project goes in the right direction and that the decisions made in the project are made correctly, and the communication made between the project and other projects or other departments are conducted within the right channels, and so on. Okay, so they steer, again, they direct the project correctly. But if it's a smaller project, the project sponsor can do all of that. Okay, so the responsibilities, again, of the steering committee is to clarify and maintain the clarity of the project charter and objectives, and to allocate resources to the project. Again, this can be done by the sponsor only. No need for a steering committee if it's a small project. Okay, a clear governance structure becomes critical when there are project changes driven by changes in internal or external business environment. Now, this is another point. If you expect changes to take place internally or externally, then here the governance also becomes important, because you want to make sure that, again, this project will maintain the right direction, even with the changes that are expected to come. So the project will maintain the right direction. Okay. Now, these are some of the items that are included in the project governance framework. For instance, project success and deliverable access criteria, they might be set by the steering committee. How do you define success? Again, remember we mentioned that nowadays it's important to define success in the project charter and to define deliverable acceptance criteria. So in critical projects, the steering committee or the governance board might own this definition, might develop this definition of project success and acceptance criteria. Process to identify, escalate, and resolve issues. If we have issues in the project, how do we handle issues? This also might be set and directed by the steering committee. Relationship between project team, organizational groups, other departments, and external stakeholders. Project organization chart with project rules. The steering committee also can or might interfere with how we organize the project chart. So the hierarchy of the resources in the project. Okay. Communication processes and procedures, processes for project decision-making, how we take decisions in the project. Can I, for instance, as a project manager, take all the decisions that I need to take, or do I have a certain level of authority that I cannot exceed? And for certain decisions, I need to go back to the steering committee and ask for their decision. This is also a part of the governance framework. Guidelines for aligning project governance and organizational strategy. So to maintain the alignment, again, project lifecycle approach. The steering committee can also help the project manager identify the proper lifecycle approach, whether we should manage this project in a traditional way or in an iterative way or an agile way. This decision also can be owned by the steering committee, or the steering committee can provide some approach on how the project manager should manage the project. Also, process for stage gate or phase reviews. They also can help the project manager identify how many phases this project should go through and what type of phases, sequential or overlapping, and what are the phase reviews or kill points, as we mentioned, or stage gates that we should set, and process for review and approval of changes. If there is any change or suggested or requested change, then how it should be handled, and what are the changes, for instance, that the project manager can take decision about, and what are the changes that the project manager should escalate to the steering committee so they can take the right decision about. And process to align internal stakeholders with project process requirements. Again, it's about the alignment. So all of these can be items in the project governance framework that the steering committee take care of and maintain. Okay. So at the beginning of a phase and at the beginning of the project, the governance committee, the steering committee, review the assumptions, help review the assumptions of the project, analyze the high-level risks, and what are the acceptance criteria of the deliverables, and when those deliverables should be delivered, and what are their acceptance criteria again, and how can we verify their completeness. And the steering committee also can take decisions of whether to terminate a project, for instance, when huge risks are involved, or to continue with a project, or to kill a project. Those changes also need a high level authority, high authority level that probably the project manager cannot take individually. So they need to refer to the steering committee in order to take those decisions. Okay. Again, the escalation paths, the phases, the targets that we want to set in the project, all of these can be referred to the steering committee to take a decision about. Okay, so this is why we need governance, and this is why we need a governance steering committee, and these are the kind of decisions that the steering committee can take. Again, if your project is small, is medium, is not that critical, then you as a project manager and probably with the project sponsor can take and make all of these decisions. But if it's a critical project, a strategic project, then you will need for sure a steering committee. And I'm sure that you probably heard this term before, the steering committee, right? In big project, you always have that steering committee that review the project every now and then, that take, strategic decisions about the project, that decide on the change requests on the project, and so on. Okay, so this is about the governance and the project governance and the items of the project governance framework. Now, after the project governance is properly set, we might move to the next step, which is the vision and the mission of the project. And again, this is very important, regardless whether you're managing your project in a traditional way or an agile approach, you need to set a clear vision and mission and to formulate the vision and mission of the project. Now we can formulate that in a separate document like the vision statement or the overview statement, or we can include that in the project charter, for instance. And then we conduct a kickoff meeting after developing, of course, the project charter to announce the formal launch of the project. We conduct a kickoff meeting. So let's start with the vision. So again, a vision is a desired end state or a set of desired objectives and outcomes that we launched the project to achieve. What is the desired outcome of this project? For instance, again, we might set a vision to develop a food delivery application. This is a vision. The vision is to build a tower or build a, I don't know, touristic spa or whatever. So you need to set a vision, a clear vision. And again, vision cannot be changed in the project once set. So a clear vision of desire and objective is critical, and it defines the deliverables that we want to achieve. And based on these deliverables and the clarity of these deliverables, we might decide the proper approach, whether we're going to manage this project in a traditional way or an agile way. Okay, so we can include the vision statement or the vision in a vision statement, and the vision statement might also include description about the product or the solution that we will create in this project. Who are the intended users or consumers of the product or the solution? The key desired objectives, differentiators from competitive approaches. So how is this product or solution different from other competitors' solution or products? And the key features, notice again, not the complete set of features, not only the key features and benefits of this product or of this solution that we are developing in this project. So it's enough, it's usually a very actually short document or small document that contains these certain clear description of what are the deliverables or what is the end state that we want to achieve by the end of the project. Okay, so the objective again from the overview statement or the project overview statement is to communicate the intent and the vision of the project to all the stakeholders in the organization. We need to make it as clear as possible and as concise as possible. It captures the project objective or problem or opportunity and the criteria for success. And when included in the charter and the charter is approved or authorized, then we have a formal authorization of the project and of the vision of the project. Okay, so after you have a clear vision, whether in an overview statement or whether in a separate statement, then you move on to develop a project charter. And I'm sure that you have heard of this document for several times. We mentioned and we indicated what is this document and what's the purpose of developing this document. So this document again is issued by the project initiator or sponsor, like I mentioned before. Usually the one that suggested the idea of the project, we call them the initiator, is assigned to sponsor that project. So he becomes the sponsor of the project, okay? So the sponsor or the initiator of the project issues this document, issues this project charter, approves it, And this charter formally authorizes the existence of a project and provides the project manager with the authority to use and apply organizational resources. So without this document, you don't have any formal authorization. Who appointed you as a project manager? Who declared the existence of this project? You need a formal document. And if the formal document that authorizes this project is what we call the project charter. Now, what are the contents? The usual contents of the project charter are the following. The project charter would indicate the purpose of launching this project. So what is the problem that the project is trying to solve? Or what is the opportunity that the project is trying to achieve? And so on, the purpose. Now, the purpose comes from where? We need to refer to what in order to know the purpose of the project? Who can remember? Or if I was assigned to develop the project charter, excellent, Majd. Yes, we refer to the business case. Yes, specifically to the business case, because the business case identified the purpose of the project. Excellent. 2, what are the measurable project objectives and related success criteria? Again, and how do we define success in the project? And again, this definition can be owned by the steering committee. I can take this definition from the steering committee and include it in the project charter. So, and what are the measures? We try always to express the objectives in a measurable way. What are the measurable project objectives? The objective is to connect 90% of the organization computers, for instance, in one network. So this is a measurable objective. We can measure it. High-level requirements that are needed in the product or in the solution. So I need, for instance, the application to be secure, to be easy to use, to be able to locate the restaurants, the near restaurants, for instance, and so on. So we can mention some high-level requirements and not detailed requirements. Now keep that in mind. The project charter is a high-level document. It does not include any details of any sort, because we don't have those details yet. We're just starting the project. We have so little information that we cannot include any details in the project charter. It's a high-level document, okay? So we can include some high-level requirements, for instance, high-level project description, boundaries. So what are the boundaries of the scope that we will maintain? These works will be done, these works will not be done, and the key deliverables. The overall project risks, again, no details, just overall project risks. What are the possible risks that the project might face? Summary milestone schedule. So what are the milestones, the expected milestones in the project? We have like 3 milestones. The first milestone indicates the end of the design phase, for instance. The second milestone indicates the end of the development phase. The third milestone indicates the end of the testing phase, for instance. So we set a summary milestone without indicating dates, because we don't have those details again. It's just like a summary milestone schedule. What are the pre-approved financial resources? The organization might pre-approve some financial resources for the project. So for instance, the organization approved $1 million for the project. Then we include this in the charter. Key stakeholders list. So what are or who are the key stakeholders in the project? And by definition, as we will see later on, how do you define stakeholders, or who are the stakeholders? Stakeholders are everyone who can impact or be impacted by the project or by the project outcomes. So we consider them stakeholders, okay? So who would those be? Project approval requirements, who should be or who should approve the charter in order to consider the project formally launched. Project exit criteria, what are the criteria that should be met before we can close the project? So again, those can be a mixture of acceptance criteria and other criteria as well that I need to make sure that we have met before I can proceed to closing the project. Who is the assigned project manager and level of authority? So the name of the project manager and the level of authority, again, according to the project governance, and the name and authority of the sponsor, of the project sponsor. So who is sponsoring this project from the top management, and what are their authority level, again, according to the project governance. Okay, so these are the usual contents of the project charter. Now, just to give you a hint, in the material that has been distributed to you, if you go to the folder, the PMBOK guide, you will find the project manager's book of forms. I will share it with you. Okay. This book is included in the PMBOK guide folder in the training material. Okay. And this book includes all, or a template and explanation of all the project documents and project plans that we will mention throughout the course. Okay, so for instance, now we just explained the project charter, right? So you can go here, you find the initiating forms, right? In the initiating process group, you find the project charter, and now you find explanation about what the project charter is, and how you can develop it, and what are the contents of it, and some tailoring tips, and how it should be aligned with other documents as well. Some description about the items, and a template of it. Okay, this is a template of a project charter. You will find this for all the documents that we will discuss throughout the project lifecycle. So this is a very important reference. I think we're going to do a course specifically for the project documents, because I see it's very important. I think it's very important for you if you want to really understand pretty well project management, then you need really to understand all of the project documents that you might be using. But again, notice that those templates are generic templates. Okay, so they need to be tailored. They need to be tailored to your business need, to your project complexity level, to your project criticality. So you might want to add extra information or to take out some information out of them. So you need to do this tailoring. And again, even the tailoring or tailoring tips are included in this book. So you can also go and read them and, you know, get some advices about how to tailor those documents. Okay, fair enough. So this is the project charter again, and those are the contents of the project charter. After developing the charter and approving the charter, what happens next usually is a kickoff meeting where we invite the key stakeholders for this kickoff meeting in order to establish the project context, to explain to them what are the objectives, what is the purpose, and give them, you know, some high level, again, exposure of the project and why we are doing it. And this meeting also will assist or will help us in the team formation, because we usually invite the key stakeholders like functional managers for other departments, and I need to take team. I need to ask them to give me some of their staff to include it in my team. So this kickoff meeting will help me actually asking them for the team, because now they know that there is a project formally, and that is I'm authorized as a project manager, and that I need resources from them as a project manager. So hopefully they will cooperate with me. And it will also ensure proper alignment to overall project vision. So we make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of what the project vision is and why we are launching this project. In this meeting, we will focus on defining again the vision of the project, and we might also use this meeting to develop what we call a team charter, which are guidelines of how we will formulate the team and what are the things that the team will work according, or what are the values that the team will work according to. We will explain the team charter in details when we come to that point. But at this point, we might again use this kickoff meeting in order to gather the team and set some ground rules that we want the team to adhere to. Okay? Does that make sense? Any questions so far? Excellent. So this is basically what happens in the traditional approach, in the traditional or predictive approach in project management. Now, the Agile can have a similar approach of initiating a project, but they have also some probably some extra things that might that we might practice in the Agile approach. For instance, the product box exercise. Now, the product box exercise is an exercise that we do with the stakeholders in order to clarify the vision of the project. And this exercise goes as following. We ask the key stakeholders, again, the key, for instance, users, the people that we will use the product or the solution that we will develop, or the top management, or whatever, who's in the meeting, who's including in the meeting, key stakeholders. We ask them to visualize the product and imagine that we will put the product in a box and we will market the product. So the question now is, what would you write on this box? What are the things that you will write on the box to make it attractive to the customers to buy? Okay. Now, if you take any product box, for instance, a mobile phone box or whatever product box you have, what is usually written on the box? What do they usually write on the box? What is written on the box usually is the most important features of the product, right? Those are the features that convince the customer to pay money, to take the box and pay money for the box, for the product, right? So for instance, if you are buying Microsoft Word, the software, then when you take the box that includes the software, what you will see written on the box is probably something like a word editor that supports, I don't know, 20 languages, auto correct, spelling and grammar autocorrect, multilingual interface, right? Those are the most important features that any user is seeking, and for those features, the customer is willing to pay, right? And by doing this exercise, we help the people clarify the most important features that should be created in the product and which will become part of the vision, right? So this is the objective of this exercise, to have a consensus of what the most important features are and to include them in the project vision. Okay, is that clear? Okay, everyone? And again, we will have kickoff meeting, but the kickoff meeting in Agile project management can be a little bit different. Because we can use also the kickoff meeting for writing stories. So basically asking the product owner to identify what are the functions that they want to create and fine-tune them. We call this also grooming. So fine-tune those user stories, make them more clear. We also can use this meeting to estimate the effort by setting points, as I mentioned, and prioritize the features and create an initial product backlog. And again, the product backlog is owned by the product owner and will be fine-tuned and progressively elaborated as we proceed in the project. And again, we mentioned that the first iteration in the project is what we call the sprint zero or iteration zero, which is a setup iteration, and no work will be done at this iteration. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, any question? Everything is clear? Excellent. Okay, let's stop here. I think it's enough for today. Okay, thank you for the notice. Okay, maybe it's a cheetah, not a leopard. How you know it's a leopard? Okay, thank you anyways. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for attending this lecture. Hope it was interesting and entertaining, and looking forward to meeting you next Thursday, right? Okay, have a nice evening and goodbye.